So I'm on the mailing list for the Charter for Compassion, and then some days ago I got their newsletter that had a quote in there about how volunteering is a key part of democracy. It's how we put into action our values and our commitment to the kind of community that we want to see. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quote with me. And I read online too an article about how volunteering is a privilege. Yeah, not everyone has the time and resource to volunteer, but it's a way to vote with our time, is what this person was putting forward. So these ideas were interesting to me because volunteering has changed my life, I will say, and that's what I wanted to reflect on today. Not only just in terms of direct service and action in society, but I will say it was a big part of my own political awakening, so to speak, and yeah, opened my mind up to many issues that I never expected from engaging in volunteering. So I first began volunteering in high school because it was mandatory. That in itself should give you pause, yeah? Mandatory volunteering. And it's, I think, become increasingly part of the curriculum. It's part of social emotional learning. All of us in Singapore high schools, the year I experienced it, it was still in the trial phase. It was a mandatory 6 hours of community involvement, and the school would try and help you. They would liaise with a nonprofit, and the first phase was just to stand out on the street with big donation cans for people to put coins in for that nonprofit, and we would give out stickers. Shortly, they realized this was neither helpful for the nonprofit or the students, right? But it was a start, yeah, in the trial phase. But it happened that one year I was sick on the day that the class went out to do this on the street. So I was left to my own devices to organize my own volunteer work. And at the time, I remember thinking, I have very poor eyesight. Yeah, and I'm close to blind, probably. And I thought, what would it be like to be visually handicapped? But maybe I should volunteer with the visually handicapped. I had this idea. So I called them up, and to my surprise, they said, oh, sure, just come down. So I take the bus down this different route, and I wait for a while. And eventually, it's the president of the organization came out to meet me. And when he came, he had, I have all these preconceptions about what visually handicapped people are like, or how they navigate the world, right? Maybe they have a service dog or a cane or whatever. This person came straight to me without any aid. It was only till he stuck out his hand that I realized, oh, he's visually impaired, right? Because it's not in where my hand would be. I was like, oh, wow, he navigated all these stairs without any help. He's like, yeah, because he knows the environment, he knows exactly the number of steps, exactly where everything is supposed to be. I was like, oh, So for that young mind to start seeing, oh, right, these are totally functioning human beings. They're just impaired in one sense. And yeah, but they have full empowerment and autonomy in this world, totally different from what I had expected. So he was so kind. He spent the whole morning just giving me a tour of the organization, showing me the different kinds of braille, because my assignment that day was to help poke dots on a piece of paper, I think, and then poke dots in maps, because machines can't do that. Yeah, so it's to create those raised bumps for the visually handicapped to feel out. And so eventually when I was assigned to my little workstation, there was a really kind man who is also part of the organization, and he spent time just connecting with me and other volunteers, just telling stories. And what impressed me the most till this day was his sense of humor. He told all these stories about well-meaning people who tried to help him and how that really didn't quite work out. But he had such a lightness about it. So simple examples like, he would be at a bus station and ask someone, could you please help to point out this bus when it comes? Yeah. So you wait. Then he said he was waiting for a really long time, and he finally decided to check in with this person. And then someone else came and tapped him on the shoulder and said, are you okay? You're talking to a lamppost. Because, he thought that was the person. That person had long since boarded the bus, and, but he had such a sense of humor about it. He also said sometimes on the bus, small children would be like, Mommy, why does that person's eyes look like that? And he would tell the kid, that's what happens when you don't behave well. But, and he also has children of his own, and all that. So he was sharing his whole life with us. So I remember that till this day. And it was my first experience of moving out of my comfort zone, being with people who were quite different. And even though I didn't go back there to volunteer regularly, it got me interested in volunteering at all. And for the next couple of years, I would help out with the Society for the Physically Disabled. I understand this is not the most PC term, but it is actually what the society is called in Singapore. My aunt is a fundraiser for that organization. So she started to rope me in, and I would do arts workshops with people who are physically disabled or their family members. And then through that, I started to learn about the issues they face. What moved me very much was we did a little playwriting workshop, and there was a girl who was wheelchair bound in there saying that she loves performance. She's seen plays at school, but there's no way she can get to a theater because very few theaters in Singapore are wheelchair accessible. And that was the first time I knew that. I don't know if there are even laws guiding that, right? And I was left sitting there thinking, oh gosh, what can we actually do, But I was maybe, 18, still like, yeah, what to do, not sure, and then moving on in my own life, right? But looking back now, I think that's the inroad of where volunteering, direct service to someone else, and starting to hear their story, understanding the difficulties they face, especially if they don't belong to the majority, gives us an inroad into longer-term advocacy work and activism, really, right? Because if I had that kind of more political mindset, I would have thought, oh yeah, are there laws requiring spaces to be accessible? Right? What are the movements worldwide that help with that? And is there a way to help this person get their voice heard in Singapore, right? A simple matter of writing a letter to the news, or is it about meeting your local politician? Yeah, but I had no education in that regard, so those avenues were not, just thinking that way was not open to me at all. Yeah, it was still in the volunteer level. What really opened my eyes was much later, volunteering with a shelter for abused migrant workers, both women and men. Yeah, so they were foreigners who were low-wage workers, and for all kinds of different reasons, due to lack of protection under the local law, were falling through the cracks. Yeah, whether it was the employer didn't buy them insurance, so they got injured, and the employer decides to dump them by the road, right? And then this nonprofit comes and picks up people and saves their lives, or women who are abused. And what happens is if you try and report your case to the labor court, you can't work, right? Or if it's a police case, you can't work during that time. Yeah, that makes no sense at all, right? You're already poor and you're coming from a tight economic situation. You report your case because the employer hasn't paid you, and they suspend your work permit while you're waiting to go to court. Yeah, what do you do? Where do you stay? Right? Do you just drop your case? I guess that's what the laws are moving people towards, right? You drop your case and you go back. Yeah, but what if it's a much more serious case, right? So this nonprofit was really filling that gap and picking up workers and creating a shelter space for them to stay. So my involvement there was just to start by, I was working for an arts organization, so my job was just to record people's stories, just hear stories, record them. But we wound up creating CDs of music by migrant workers as a way to humanize migrant workers, right? They're not just people who come and clean your floor or build buildings. They're humans, they have hopes, they have dreams, they have families, a way to tell their stories. And that's what really got me started thinking about, what are the laws that protect workers? Why is this happening? Why do employers seem to have such a huge imbalance of power? Yeah. And then starting to see what advocacy organizations were doing in this regard as well. What was very painful at the time was seeing the debate in the nonprofits between, should we put our energy to direct service or should we be more political advocates? Yeah. And those with different views didn't seem to get along. Because it seems to me you need both, right? I think most organizations know that now, maybe, that you need to have the direct service to those in need, and you need people looking at the big picture. Yeah, legal reform, how to bring about public awareness. Yeah, but as long as these two are not working together, then I think the efforts are limited. Right? It's kind of like compassion and wisdom. That's the way I was thinking of it. Maybe not compassion in the genuine sense, but if you're just looking at, okay, how do we serve the needs of one person now, that's important, right? There's a hungry mouth to feed, or there's someone who needs a bed to sleep in. You fill that need, but what happens in the long term? right? Do you start looking at what were all the causes and conditions that created this situation in the first place? And that's where I think the wisdom piece comes in, the advocacy, the activists who are looking at like, hey, what are the laws or conditions that are creating this situation? And how do we start to shift that in the long run? And this is a very slow, painstaking process, right? That requires you to build coalitions with lawmakers, politicians, find a way to get your cause out to the public. Yeah, but you need both. Yeah. In a sense, I think in a place like Singapore, it's a lot safer to just do the direct service because it seems so apolitical, right? Oh, here's a person in need, we provide for that person in need. Done. Yeah, we're not questioning public policy. We're not asking for legal reform, whereas the advocacy piece seems to be much more political in that sense, right? You're looking for a broader long-term social change. Yeah. But here in the US, I think with a very active civil society, we see organizations active in both ways, or what's inspiring for me to see is the coalition building between civic organizations. Those that do the advocacy work are working hand in hand with those providing direct service, which I think is a very healthy balance. Because, you know, there are limited resources and a big need, and everyone needs to come together. Yeah. So, yeah, those are just some of my preliminary thoughts on how volunteering, whether mandatory or not, or whether coming from the goodness of your heart, is a way for us not just to be generous, to practice generosity, but also bring in all the other far-reaching attitudes, yeah, that we have. It's our wish not to harm. That's why we go out and protect and save life or connect with those in need. There's also the fortitude of having to repeatedly come back day after day. I have so much admiration for long-term volunteers with specific causes, yeah, because they're the ones who show up every day. And sometimes it might feel like you're just crying in the wind, or throwing one starfish back at a time when the whole beach is filled with starfish. But that it matters to that starfish, right, is what they always say. So yeah, a lot of fortitude, joyous effort, right, knowing when to rest so you don't burn out. But most importantly, I think wisdom. Yeah, knowing where to put your energy, who your allies are, and who to collaborate with. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to share how this little act of being made to volunteer was really quite important in my life. And you might consider too, if you are already an active volunteer, how you can put into practice the 6 far-reaching attitudes and also expand your view of the help you are putting into this world.